Coming up next on This Week in Computer Hardware, we got a lot to talk about from CES. We dive into the new Tegra K1 processor. We talk about GSync versus FreeSync, 4K displays, new graphics cards, and a lot more news from CES. It's all coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twitch.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 249, recorded on January 9th, 2014, the CES wrap-up. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Ting.com. Ting is a mobile phone service that makes sense. Save money with Ting. Pay only for what you use. Ting doesn't require a contract and offers unlimited devices on one shared plan. To save $25 on your first Ting device, visit twitch.ting.com. That's twitch.ting.com. Hey everybody, welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm your host, Ryan Shrout, and although Patrick Norton still remains on the grounds at the Consumer Electronics Show, both myself and Josh Walworth, who's joining us, just got back from that show today. Josh, how was your trip back? It looks like everything is more or less in the places that you left it.
More or less. I mean, there's more trash on the ground, and my children seem to have a problem throwing candy wrappers away. And my wife is unable to tell them to do such a thing. So anyway, yeah, I've got new carpeting.
Nice.
Courtesy
Garbage
of
carpeting?
Hershey's. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
That is nice.
So we were at CES. We were there for a lot of days, it seems like. But we just got back today. And there was, I would say, a surprising amount of news from the show, although maybe nothing earth-shattering. Would you think that? Do you think that's a fair kind of assessment of the 5 days we spent in Las Vegas together?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, AMD had their stuff, 4K panels everywhere.
Yep.
I'm trying to think what else. I mean, the things in the past that we saw, like, SSDs were a big thing one year. The big 3D TVs were another big thing other years. We didn't see anything like that this year. It was a nice mix of some new things, but nothing really blew me away.
We've got a good list of things we'll go through here, but let's start with basically like the first big press conference we went to on Sunday night, which was NVIDIA, and they announced a new Tegra processor. So they kind of have this cadence now, where they announced Tegra 4 last year. I think they announced Tegra 3 the year before that at CES.
Yep.
And maybe Tegra 2. I can't remember that far back. That's a long time.
Yeah, Tegra 3, then a year before Tegra 2. But go ahead.
They announced Tegra K1. So it's not Tegra 5. It's not Logan. Now it's called Tegra K1. And the K designates the architecture that it's based on. So the GPU architecture on this SoC is based on Kepler. It actually has 192 Kepler CUDA cores. And they're in almost every way identical to what you get on a discrete desktop GPU, obviously, but you're just getting fewer of them. So you're getting 192 CUDA cores. You're getting the same 4+1 CPU design, where these are 4 Cortex A15 processing cores, and then you have this separate 5th A15 that is used for low power standby modes and anything that doesn't require a lot of performance. They also showcased and demoed, just kind of real short preview, basically said, here it is, we have one back and working, a Tegra K1 that actually has NVIDIA Denver cores on them, 2 of them. And Denver cores are their kind of custom designed processor based on the ARM ISA. So that would be similar to what Qualcomm's doing with their parts, right, Josh?
Yeah. Qualcomm has their own design. They call it Crate. And, for every generation, like the A9 came out, their Crate after that was slightly faster. So that's kind of their MO.
Yeah, so NVIDIA is going to try to get into that. We don't know anything about performance of Denver or its efficiency or anything like that yet, but it's a good first step for them to kind of make more waves than they had in the past. The Tegra the Tegra K1, even with the A15s, you know, they're claiming is 1.4x the performance for the same power envelope compared to Tegra 4. And it will run at about half the power for the same performance in some instances compared to the Tegra 4. So, you know, they're up on the CPU portion, but the real impressive part is the GPU, where integrating Kepler graphics cores into Tegra K1 creates some really interesting things. So it supports OpenGL ES 3.0. It's not the first chip announced to support ES 3.0, but it also supports OpenGL 4.4, DX11, tessellation, CUDA, and those things in particular, in my mind, OpenGL, create a lot of opportunities for NVIDIA, especially when you couple it with, at this press conference, they announced that Unreal Engine 4 had been ported to Tegra K1 running on OpenGL. So what NVIDIA wants us to believe, and what we'll have to wait and see if it happens, is that because now the GPU architecture of K1 is very similar to the GPU architecture that is in, no, I want to take that back. Because there's an API support in K1 that is also supported by the consoles, that is also supported by PCs and supported by Linux as well, and SteamOS, that there will be some kind of translation of games across consoles, which NVIDIA has no wins, SteamOS, which they are the dominant player in right now, and PC and these tablet form factors that the Tegra K1 will go into, right? So we saw a demo of Serious Sam 3 being played on a Tegra K1 tablet. We saw Unreal Engine shooter demo running on a Tegra K1 tablet, and we saw some really impressive visuals running on this part. They actually went so far as to kind of, you know, compare the graphics performance of Tegra K1 to that of the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3. And in their estimations, the Tegra K1 is a significantly more powerful part than the total graphics solution in the PlayStation 3 or the Xbox 360. So that, you know, the idea of getting the previous generation console that a lot of people are still releasing games for, and a lot of people are still using as their primary gaming machine, in a tablet form factor, it creates some pretty interesting, again, opportunities for this if the game developers are willing to invest time and port these games over. NVIDIA's job at this point going forward is going to be making sure that that's easy to do, that they have the software tools and workflows necessary to get that done. Tegra K1 has some other improvements on the image signal processor, so the camera features. They have, you know, they've improved some CPU performance even on the A15 version. We don't know anything about Denver yet, but we don't know anything about any design wins, any projected design wins. You know, you got to assume they're going to make a new Shield with Tegra K1. You got to assume they're going to make a new like Tegra Note 7 with the Tegra K1, because that's actually the form factor they were using for their reference designs at the show. It's an interesting little part, right? Like Tegra 4 was a powerful SoC that got no traction. And I don't know how many more generations NVIDIA can afford for that to be the case.
Yeah, they got some, you know, some wins with like Surface, the Note that you
that was
talked
Tegra
about
3
earlier. Oh, Tegra 3 Surface. Sorry, you're right. Well, never mind then. Yeah.
I mean, Tegra 4, there was an Asus tablet, and then they had their Shield and their Tegra tablet. And I'm sure there were a couple of other ones that I'm just not remembering offhand, but it wasn't a lot. It definitely wasn't enough for what they were expecting. So now that this is what they were building towards the whole time with Tegra, but they wanted to get to architecture parity between their discrete GPU and their mobile GPU, so that it's using the same architecture. There are obviously some changes in the fabric and how everything communicates, but fundamentally it's the same architecture, and that allows for you know, this developer base that already knows NVIDIA's architectures to possibly do very interesting things with K1, but we'll have to see.
You know what I just noticed?
Yeah.
There was no mention of Tegra 4i, their integrated Tegra 4 that has the Icera modem on it.
You're right.
I didn't hear a single word.
They didn't say anything about integrating that with Tegra K1 either.
No.
Interesting. We should ask them about that.
That'd be a good idea.
NVIDIA also had a big push with GSync monitors. So we've tested GSync here. We've talked about it numerous times on this podcast. So we're not going to dive into the tech of it. It's obvious. It's a variable refresh technology that allows you to render games at the same rate as you're displaying them on the screen, which has a lot of great benefits. There were at least 4 monitors. I'm sorry, there were at least 3 monitors announced. I think there were probably 1 or 2 more that we didn't have specific news coverage of. The first one, I think the most interesting one, was the Asus ROG Swift PG278Q. This is a 2560 by 1440 monitor, 27-inch, 120 hertz panel. So this is even if it were just a 2560 by 1440 120 hertz panel being sold directly by a display company, I think that would be interesting in and of itself. But that they integrated G-Sync onto it makes it more interesting, right? So I think this is probably the best. This will probably be the best example of G-Sync technology because you're getting high resolution, high refresh rate, and still the smooth variable refresh rate tech of G-Sync. It's going to be a little pricey. What was it? $649, $699?
I thought both were $799.
$799. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah,
Both the Asus monitors were $799.
But you know, when you say $799, you have to say it excitedly.
No, $799. Yeah, see, it's not.
Thank you.
It doesn't work as well.
No.
We'll talk about the Asus ROG Swift again in a little bit. I get to demo it for just a second, but you know we're going to get one of those in, and we'll spend some time with it and see how the panel works. Philips announced a 27-inch 19 by 10 144 hertz panel. I'm guessing this is the same panel as the Asus 144 hertz display. Well, no, theirs was a 24, so this is a 27, so it's a little bit different. And then BenQ had one as well, but I think the more interesting one was kind of like it wasn't actually an announced product. This was more of a mock-up to prove that it was possible. NVIDIA showed a modified Asus PQ321Q, which is their 4K monitor with G-Sync. So they just took one, they modified it themselves. They were using the exact same module hardware, although the cables and everything were different. So I kind of asked if they'd be able to send me a module and you know, maybe I could tear into my $3,500 display and see if I could get it to work with G-Sync, but they said that might be a bad idea. But it looked really, really good. And at a high resolution, this seems to be the best place to take advantage of G-Sync technology, where your frame rates will probably be lower, right? So you saw that one as well, right? I mean, it was a 60 hertz panel, and yeah, it just looked really nice and smooth. But unfortunately, no 4K like display announcements. So it's going to be a little bit longer at least before we see anything like that. Now, the real drama around this whole CES, like if I had to pick one point that was, you know, interesting from like a behind the scenes view, was clearly the commotion that AMD caused with their variable refresh rate demo called FreeSync, what they were dubbing FreeSync. That's why it's using it in quotes. There's not a product they're actually announcing or anything. Where Raja Koduri, who's their SVP of imaging, I forget now, visual computing.
Visual computing.
Yeah. Where he had a demo where he brought out 2 laptops and they had like a spinning windmill just as a kind of a static thing so that you could see animation changes like NVIDIA created the pendulum. And they had 2 notebooks. One of them had a variable refresh rate technology integrated in it, and one did not. And side by side, and you can see that the ones that they had integrated FreeSync on, if you want to call it that, was smooth at, you know, frame rates like 40 or 50, and it wasn't necessarily at 60 or 30, something that was even with VSync. The interesting thing is they kind of said initially that we don't understand why NVIDIA wanted to spend money and develop hardware for this. This is coming. This is a feature that the feature that AMD used for the demonstration was they used EDP 1.0, so Embedded DisplayPort 1.0, which is a technology used in SoCs and in notebooks, in tablets, for a more power efficient display connection technology. One of the features that it has is what they called panel. It's not panel self refresh, I don't think. But it was a variable refresh technology that basically, if the game or the display didn't need to display 60 frames per second, 60 hertz, then the panel wouldn't refresh at 60 hertz, therefore saving power, right? That was its purpose in the mobile and tablet form factors. So what AMD did was they took that same technology, that same idea, and said, well, we can go the other way as well and do what NVIDIA did. We can implement this for gaming. So they made a custom driver. They found an off-the-shelf laptop that had an EDP 1.0 connection and a controller that supported it. Sorry. And they were able to get it demoed and working. So, there was this back and forth between NVIDIA and AMD about whether or not this was a good idea or a bad idea. AMD's stance is that, look, EDP 1.0 is mobile tech. It's not in desktop displays today. But DisplayPort 1.3 implements these same features. So when DisplayPort 1.3 monitors come out, in theory, if the controllers implement that feature correctly, they will be able to support variable refresh without a proprietary controller, right? So AMD would just have to update their driver. They'd be able to implement that feature with displays that have DisplayPort 1.3. NVIDIA, on the other hand, believes that, yeah, you could do that and you could wait, but it might be how long until we see DisplayPort 1.3 monitors out in the market with the right controllers. And even if you get those correct controllers that support that feature, are they tuning it the correct way? Are they looking for things like distortion, visual distortion? Where do you set your minimum frame rate? Are they going to perfect it in the way that the enthusiast gamer would want them to perfect it, or is it just going to be like a checkbox feature that doesn't really ever get implemented because it's a little bit off, right? And that's kind of NVIDIA's stance is with GSync, people are going to get this technology earlier, and they believe they're going to have a better version of the technology. We just don't know for sure yet until we see some kind of implementation with DisplayPort 1.3 down the road.
Yeah, because the only thing we have now are mobile products, laptops, tablets, whatever, and how effective really is that going to be for most people?
Yeah. They did say, AMD did say that there might already be some monitors on the market that could support variable refresh rate today with a firmware update, but they didn't want to give me any names of what those displays were. So we're going to try to continue to get that information and see how this drama thing goes. But it's interesting. It's interesting to see. Obviously, what we want is this feature for everybody because I think it's a great gaming technology. But if you want it now, you can still get it, but you have to go through NVIDIA. You have to be in their ecosystem. You have to have their cards. You have to buy one of these new monitors. So something to keep in mind. Speaking of monitors, we mentioned 4K, but there were a handful of 4K monitors that were released that were cheap. Did you see any of these in person, Josh? The Lenovo, Philips, or Asus?
I saw the Lenovo and the Asus,
And
not the Philips.
What did you think?
The Lenovo was still kind of pre-production, so it was only running at 30 hertz.
Mm-hmm.
The Asus seemed like it was a little bit better.
Yeah,
I think that is more finalized in terms of production. They're both, as far as I know, these are the ones that are TN panels, right?
Yes.
Yes, the 4K TN panels. But they don't look as bad as most TNs. You do get some color shifting, but it's not horrific. And I think part of that is just because, the pixel pitch is so fine that, kind of the I guess you'd call it the channel depth is less than that of a 1080p TN panel. And so you don't get as bad a color shifting when you're off center. But when you're directly on center, it still looks pretty good. I mean, not as good as, perhaps as a nicely backlit IPS panel, but it still looks, if you were to just glance at it, you would have no idea if it was TN or IPS until you really spent some time in front of it.
I think the most exciting part about these monitors is definitely the price. The Asus and Lenovo are both $799. I don't think I found a price for the Philips display, which. So actually, when we did 4 different podcasts while we were at CES, and the first one was after we had seen Lenovo's display, and they didn't really convince me that it was going to be a 60 hertz monitor. It was running at 30 when we saw it. They said it would run at 60, but they wouldn't tell me how it was going to run at 60. And then we went to go see the Asus one. I had the same question, and it took a good long time for us to find somebody that could answer the question in a way that I felt confident about the answer. And so the answer is yes, that these monitors will support 4K through MST, the same way the Asus PQ321Q does it today with 2 scalers inside the monitor. But future iterations of this display, my guess is they'll release a new one that will use a single scaler that has the ability to support that bandwidth at that refresh rate. So, but the idea of getting 4K, 60 hertz panels, even though they are TN, so it's not going to look quite as good as the PQ321, but we're talking about $799, $800 instead of $3,500, I guess, is what it still sells at. I mean, that's a significant price drop for that kind of monitor, right? I mean, you do go from 32 to 28.
Yeah, it's 27 or 28. 28. Yeah,
28,
that's dense.
Yeah, it is.
I saw video running on it. It's like I can't see pixels no matter how close I. Yeah. It was nice. Yeah.
I think that's interesting. And going back to the Asus ROG Swift G-Sync monitor, none of these 4Ks are G-Sync displays. But now, like if you just look at those 2 Asus models, you can for the same price, $799, you can get a 25 by 14, 120 hertz G-Sync panel, or you can get a 60 hertz 4K panel. And I honestly don't know where I would go at this point between the two. I kind of want to have like both on a gaming system where like I would spend several hours gaming on G-Sync versus several hours gaming on the 4K and really see, does the resolution increase and density increase with the 4K, the PB287Q, make up for the smoothness differences, or does it, which do you prefer, for your actual gaming? I kind of think I would lean towards the G-Sync monitor because 25 by 14 is still a pretty good resolution. If we're talking about a 27-inch 1080p, I don't think that would even come close. But I'm not 100% sure because my times with the 4K monitor that we have here have all been great, right? It's all been pretty awesome. So it's an interesting little kind of announcement conundrum that they've come up with. Let's go ahead.
I think if you actually gamed on it, that 25 by 16 G-Sync at 120 hertz, it's just going to be nice.
You think that the smoothness just
the
will
overall
win out in
experience.
that.
Yeah.
I think I kind of lean that way as well. It's hard to say for sure, and then you'd have to see like for your non-gaming purposes, just at your desktop doing other things, would the 4K be that much better with that to kind of, make up for that? I don't know. I think it's a really interesting discussion. They're both good products probably from Asus. So hopefully I can convince them to send me both and we can run a little test. We can do a little case study. That would be a shame.
Yeah.
Let's take a moment to thank today's podcast sponsor. This would be our friends from Ting. If you don't know what Ting is, they are a mobile service provider, or as they like to call themselves, a no BS mobile service provider. They're an MVNO, a reseller of the nationwide Sprint network, and they're different in quite a few important ways. They don't have any contracts. They don't have any early termination fees. It's truly and completely contract free. They also have an ETF relief program. So if you are in one of those programs that has an early termination fee, if you come to Ting, they will help you out. They will give you a credit for 25% of your ETF up to $75 per device. Simply purchase your device through Ting, port your number, and submit your final bill with your ETF detailed from your previous carrier. You can get info on that at ting.com/ETF. They don't have any bundling. They don't have ride-along services, no overages charges. There's no penalties. There's no add-on charges for voicemail or anything like that. There's no mysterious line items on your bill. Ting charges you for what you use plus whatever taxes they're legally required to collect. no recovery fees, hidden charges, other stuff like that. You can put unlimited devices on one plan. You can have as many devices as you want, sharing pooled minutes, messages, megabytes, and each plan costs a flat $6. Or I'm sorry, each device costs a flat $6 per month. A powerful online account control panel allows you to take control of your account, your usage, and your bills in one powerful little control panel, which is nice. They have no hold customer service. You can call 1-855-TING-FTW anytime between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and a real person will pick up the phone. Plus, they have good online support at help.ting.com. So how does it all work? You purchase your device from Ting, which you'll receive in 2 to 5 business days, or you can bring over your favorite Sprint phone to Ting, like the iPhone 4 or 4S. Check out the full list of eligible phones by going to their special URL and clicking the BYOD link at the top of the page. That's bring your own device. Ting will even help turn your old device into cash to help with the move to Ting. After you activate your device with Ting and have the option to select a new phone number or port an existing one, Ting will break your rates out by minutes, text messages, and megabytes and bill you at the end of the month for what you used. So visit today, twitch.ting.com. That's TWICH.ting.com. Save money and better manage your mobile phone usage with Ting. Check out their savings calculator and see how much money you or your company can save. This weekend, computer hardware viewers, that's you, can also save $25 on your first Ting device when you sign up. So please visit twitch.ting.com and start saving today. And we thank Ting for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. So let's talk about some other stuff that happened. AMD had a pretty big presence at CES. They had a press conference. They announced Kaveri. I guess they kind of officially announced Kaveri, even though we've known about it on the roadmap for some time. And it will be released pretty soon. I can't say exactly when, but too soon. What did they did they give us any details on that at their press conference, Josh?
About which part?
Kaveri?
The actual chip itself or the release time?
I don't know either.
Okay. Well, they did tell us that you can pre-order them now through their different partners. In fact, one partner put up some benchmarks that they shouldn't have, and those got subsequently taken down. But Kaveri is their first HSA compliant APU. It has the shared memory. It's got all the other HSA details. It's got HQ, which allows the GPU to actually assign work to the CPU. So you get done with data sets and everything comes out, and the GPU is like, hey, CPU, I'm going to hand this off to you because you're going to be doing better at this than me. It's a 95-watt TDP part, so it's a little less than, I think, what the first APU was 100 watts.
Yeah.
They talked a little bit about performance. They said that overall, you're going to get better integer type, instructions per clock increases over the previous versions of Richland. They didn't say entirely how much. I mean, we saw those benchmarks up on the screen released by AMD, but PC Mark 08 has some interesting things that it does that may inflate the score in favor of AMD a little bit more than, say, what Intel does. But still, we still see a nice 9% increase in overall performance going from the last generation Richland 6800K up to the all-new 7850K. Graphics is a huge increase, going from a VLIW4 architecture that was in Richland and the VLIW5 that was actually in Llano. This is the new GCN. They've got 8 compute cores. It turns out to be, 512 stream units, or each graphics core next compute component has 4x16 wide vector units. And so, I mean, it pumps out a lot of math, and it's got program counters and all kinds of other stuff. So they're claiming that you can kind of see this as a traditional core as compared to what, NVIDIA says with their 192 cores. So, I mean, it's not apples to apples. But the product is pretty beefy for what you get. I think they announced, did Lisa Sue? I can't remember if she announced the price. I don't think she did.
I don't
So
think
I'm
she
going to
did.
leave that off.
Let's do.
But they talked about sub $200 being the sweet spot. So you can make your own guesses about where it's going to be. And, the graphics really do help to make this part a fairly compelling decision for people who do not need high-end gaming, but are willing to do 3D and some gaming. And it's an all-in-one part. It's got good performance from the Steamroller cores. It's got class-leading performance on the graphics side for an integrated processor. Again, it's probably going to be under $200. It's going to have a 95-watt TDP. It's got a mature infrastructure with FM2 Plus, which has been out for some months. And really, that's only an extension of FM2 and the chipsets that go along with it. So we're going to see reviews here sometime. And it will be interesting to see, where everything kind of shakes out. Because I've got a couple of the FM2 Plus boards here, and they're really nice units. They have as many features as a lot of higher-end boards, but like this Gigabyte, what is it, the G1 Sniper A88X, it's like $119, and it's jam-packed with all kinds of stuff, but it's only $119. So it's going to be interesting to see where everything kind of pans out. But Kaveri looks like it's going to be a good product for AMD. It's not going to take them over the top of Intel, but it's going to make them very competitive in certain areas, and really the overwhelming favorite, at least in integrated graphics. And I think that it even, in the end, is going to compare very well with the Iris Pro from Intel, which is, of course, that extra couple of vector units and the how much is it? 128 megs of what is essentially L4 cache. Now that chip is expensive. It's not sitting in the sub $200 range, but graphics performance wise, they look to be pretty close. But with the Intel side, these we've got what the Bricks HD or whatever Bricks Max and Apple. Yeah, Bricks Pro, and the Apple products that only are the ones that utilized Iris Pro at this time.
All right. Well, I'll say is you'll know a lot more about this very soon. Also from CES, a big story was the continued evolution of Valve's Steam OS and Steam machines. They kind of, not the big industry secret here, but they went ahead and announced 13 launch partners. Alienware, Alternate, CyberPower PC, Digital Storm, Falcon Northwest, Gigabyte, iBuyPower, Material.net. I don't know what that is. Next, Origin PC, Scan Computers, Webhalen, and Zotac. And Main Gear should be on that list too. So there should be 14. But they basically, they brought the press up to a meeting. Gabe Newell came out and talked to us for about 10 minutes. And not much else was disclosed, right? In terms of pricing and performance and specifications, they kind of said you really need to talk to these system builders. All these systems are going to be sold with a controller. If you buy it with Steam OS installed, it will have come with the Steam OS controller, which I did get to use for the first time, and it was actually pretty interesting.
How was the haptic feedback?
That was really cool. I guess I didn't read about that part. I didn't expect it, or I had forgotten about it. But when you move your thumb across the trackpads, there's like a haptic feedback. It almost feels like little pellets hitting the bottom of the trackpad right on your thumb, right? So it follows your thumb as you move it around on the trackpad. And I guess it's to, make sure you're moving your thumb, and then it has rings on the trackpad so you know where you are kind of in relation to the center of the trackpad. I thought it worked pretty well. I probably would have jacked up the sensitivity on the right trackpad, which is what you use for your rotation and stuff, some than what they had it set at on the demo station. But it was pretty cool. One particular machine that they showed, that you kind of just mentioned that I thought was interesting was the Gigabyte Bricks Pro, which is that part when it comes with Iris Pro graphics, Iris Pro 5200 graphics. It's in the vein of the Intel NUC design, but this has their top-end embedded 4770R part. It also has support for an MSATA SSD and 2.5-inch hard drive, I believe, as well, which is pretty cool. Yeah, there it is. So I don't know what this is going to cost. I'm trying to get one in very, very quickly so we can kind of do some of that Iris Pro testing up against Kaveri. So we'll see how that turns out. But that's a pretty cool little device, and I think it was the only strictly Intel-based Steam OS machine that we saw announced. So there's that going. Also in the Bricks line from Gigabyte, which is it's hilarious to me that this has expanded the way it has. The Bricks Max that you mentioned is actually a Haswell-based quad hard drive version of the Bricks. It has support for 4 2.5-inch hard drives, meant to be used as kind of like a NAS, network storage, multimedia device. It also runs Android. It has a Haswell processor and runs Android, which I don't think I've ever seen before. Have you ever heard of a device that does that?
No, because you need. Well,
I mean, they have Atom running Android, right?
yeah,
I've seen that.
They do.
Right? But I've never seen Haswell running Android. It seems probably overkill, but I mean, I guess you could put Windows on it and you could put, you know, any other kind of storage-based system on there, right? It's just that you have a hardware that supports 4 2.5-inch hard drives. I'm sure the Android portion just makes it less expensive when they're selling it. But I didn't get a bunch of time to spend with it, but I want to see kind of how the Android OS applications facilitate the NAS functionality on it. I think that would be interesting to kind of investigate and see. We saw some new graphics cards, of course, both NVIDIA and AMD based. We saw 3 different custom cooled Radeon R9 290X cards, one from Gigabyte, one from MSI, one from Power Color. We had the Gigabyte Windforce, the MSI Lightning, the Power Color PCS Plus, and all of these are using high-end coolers, much better coolers than the reference 290Xs. We've already started to get some of them in the office here and do some testing. Any of these stand out to you, in particular the 290X? I know you're a fan of the Lightning series, what MSI has done. They've done very good things with those designs in the past, and I assume that the 290X will be just as good, if not a little bit better than what we've seen in the recent history, like the 7970 Lightning. Yeah,
and you tested the GTX 780 that they released last year, and yeah, it's got the triple fans. They've got a pretty good fan control technique involved in that. They program that fairly well, so it's not an onerous thing to have around at just idle temperatures. It doesn't get too loud, as far as I know. What were your impressions of the Lightning? Because it seems like of the group that we talk about, MSI perhaps has the greatest tradition and most experience in custom cooling and all the tricks and things that you can do. Asus comes in second, then PC, the Power Color and other guys are, you know, they've had implementations, but it's always kind of been, hey, we're going to just slap our own little cooler on here. We're not going to talk about, you know, power curves for the fan. And I
agree.
You know, heat stepping.
I don't think Gigabyte or Power Color really get into like the PCB design, and in my, I don't know how much customization they're actually doing in that regard. Asus and MSI definitely do those things. I think that, I mean, the MSI card looked good. They have this, my problem with the Lightning card is that it's so over-engineered in design, yet they still limit what its overclock is out of the box. Like, it's going to be clocked at 1040 megahertz. It's like, I know this GPU, maybe 1050. I know this GPU can go higher than that. Why not push it there, right? They did that with all the Lightning cards, right? So Asus kind of does the same thing. There's obviously a business decision here about RMAs and return rates, and then, you know, person that's going to buy a Lightning card is going to overclock it themselves anyway, I guess. So it's really not that big of a deal. But the cooler looked new. They said they have done a lot of improvements on the actual cooler integration, the heat pipe integration. It's still a very heavy and dense card. It's 2+ slots, so it's going to take up 3 slots of room, just like the Power Color PCS and the I think maybe the Gigabyte.
The Lightning is definitely more than 2 slots big.
Yeah. Yeah, it's 2+ or whatever. So it's like 2.5. So it's going to take up 3 slots. And then the Asus Poseidon GTX 780 was kind of cool. This is I think they're going to have a 780 and a 770. But it's a hybrid cooler that is mostly like it has a heat pipe design for air cooling, but then it also has on the top a pair of water barbs for you to include this cooler into your custom water cooling loop, which is kind of interesting. Now, it does sacrifice a little bit on the air cooling side of it. I think they said probably 3 to 4 degrees Celsius was going to be the delta between, the standard DirectCU2 and this Poseidon version of the same GPU. But if you fluctuate between air-cooled and water-cooled systems, then this kind of integrated water block on there. But then again, and now I don't know anything about the performance of the water block.
Well, why not both?
Well, I think you do run both, right?
Yeah.
If you use the water cooling, I'm sure the fans will still be spinning, but they'll probably spinning at their minimum.
That might be a nice combination.
Yeah. Every time I go to these shows or I go to QuakeCon, I see these water cooling setups and I always want to build one myself. I'm like, I'm going to do that this month. I'm going to start looking into that. I'm going to ask for suggestions. And then I go, nah.
You should do that in February once things kind of slow down a bit.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, February, March. That's a good idea. Okay. Notebooks. We saw 2 new notebooks that kind of stood out to me in terms of slim gaming. This is people that want high-performance gaming notebooks, but they don't want it to be 4 inches thick. MSI had one in the GS70 Stealth, which is the GS70 is an existing line that they have, but this is kind of a new version. It's got Haswell processor in it. It's a 17-inch screen, 1080p, 3.9 pounds, so very light. It has a starting price of $1,500. It has a yet unnamed NVIDIA graphics card in it. Think about it for just a second. It won't be really hard to figure it out, but I don't think it's going to be like a super dramatic performance increase, but it's a new part. But it has 3 mSATA SSDs running in RAID 0, in addition to a 2.5-inch 1 terabyte hard drive. So I always knew, I knew you could do 3 SSDs in RAID 0. Or 3 hard drives in RAID 0, but it just sounded weird when they said they were going to do that. So
sounds like a bad idea for people who stored a lot of really good information.
Yeah, well, that's why they give you the standard hard drive, I guess. It's interesting because we've talked to many people that had most of these gaming laptops use RAID 0 on hard drives or SSDs or one or both, right? And it's not something I would prefer necessarily myself, because the performance of one SSD is probably more than enough for these use cases. But this also gets you the capacity. So they're saying you can get 3 256 gig SSDs in there. Now you have a 68 gig drive option. So do whatever you want. The second one is actually from a brand called Aorus, the X7, and it's actually a new gaming brand that Gigabyte is bringing to the table, and it's also a slim system. It is a 17-inch machine. It weighs quite a bit more, actually. It's 6.4 pounds. It's less than an inch thick, though, and it runs a pair of GTX 765M GPUs running in SLI. It also has a pair of mSATA ports in RAID 0 and a 2.5-inch hard drive up to 1 terabyte. This is actually a pretty cool machine to see in person. It's kind of, the whole idea of the Razer thin gaming notebook and what MSI has done in the past with the GS70 and what now this Gigabyte Aorus brand is launching with is pretty interesting stuff. They're still big machines like footprint-wise, but one's at about 4-something pounds, one's at 6-something pounds. Pretty interesting. I'd like to see what their battery life is when they're not in gaming mode, because that could make them, reasonable for people that want both a laptop to take to school or something and one to actually play games on. So I'm going to skip all the storage stuff because we don't have Alan here, and it's really, if you go to pcper.com/CES, you'll get all the coverage that we did from the show, and including a lot of Alan's posts. But we're running long here. Lots of M.2 drives. That was a lot of stuff we saw. And then he saw AData, Plexter, and Kingston PCI Express SSDs. So if you want to know what's going to be happening in the world of storage in 2014, it sounds kind of like PCI Express SSDs.
Because SATA 3 or SATA 6G is holding SATA drives back.
We didn't see SATA Express anywhere really. We saw the Asus motherboard that supports it, but no devices that used it. So that's a really bad sign for SATA Express, which seemed pretty inefficient to begin with anyway. Let's see. Huawei. How do I pronounce this name? Huawei.
Sure.
They were demoing at the ARM booth at PepCom the first true 8-core smartphone. So this is a smartphone that uses a MediaTek MT6592 SoC. It has 8 Cortex A7 cores. So it's not a big little configuration. They're all using, it's using 8 small cores essentially. And it will use all of them at the same time if necessary, right? And I think the clock speed, I think the SoC can go up to 2 gigahertz, but at least the Android phone here reported it was up to 1.7. 2 gigs of RAM, which is a solid amount on that. But it only had a 1280 by 720 screen.
Yeah, I was going to say that resolution it's kind of grim for that size of a...
Yeah. Especially considering that when I was looking up information about this SoC, it says specifically that MediaTek, says it has great support for 4K, high bitrate video, as well as H.265 and VP9 playback. So, taking advantage of some of that kind of feature set on a 1280 by 720 screen is a little bit disappointing. But ARM is more showcasing it as, hey, here is 8 cores on a phone. And I think both you and I agree that 8 cores on a phone sounds kind of silly, but I believe it's necessary to kind of put the hardware platform out there and try to let software catch up to it sometimes, as long as it is not less power efficient than the alternatives that exist.
Yeah, because they've got some nice technology behind it to utilize all 8 of those cores in a fairly power efficient way. It's not just all 8 cores all the time, but it'll swap things out, go into sleep modes pretty quickly, keep some in. And so it seems like it's a fairly flexible part that when you really need the extra juice, it can supply it. But, when you need it to just be quiet and be energy efficient, it can do that as well.
Yeah. So there's so much stuff here. We're having to cut some of our CES coverage down, but Corsair had a lot of stuff on display. This company never stops announcing products as far as I can tell. Just every month they have 2 or 3 new things, either a new market they're getting into or a bunch of new products. They had some good ones this year. They announced the Corsair Graphite Series 760T and 730T gaming cases. And did you see this one, Josh?
I did not.
It was striking when you first see it because the window on the side panel is almost the entire side panel. There's like a stripe
that's kind of cool
of plastic on the top and on the bottom.
So there's barely any bezel.
Yeah.
Jeremy will be so happy.
And they had the demo systems and they had lights inside of it. And at first, if the acrylic is nice and clean, it almost looks like there's no door there. And it actually looks really, really neat. They have a white one and they have a black one. And they had some systems up and running with that. And then the 730T is the same design, but it actually doesn't have the window. It's just a metal door. So the doors on it are on hinges and they swing. They swing from the front of the case to the back of the case, right? So they open up in that direction on both sides. So you can get. I like the cases with doors on them, and these doors do come off if you need to remove it for installation purposes. But for maintenance and quickly getting in or swapping parts. I think it's a pretty neat little design, and it looks pretty cool in person too. The rest of the design as well. The part on top is removable. I think you can put a triple rad up there, or you can kind of cover it to produce better airflow from front to back while keeping a little bit keep the noise down a little bit on it too. They also announced a 1500 watt power supply. The
that's as big
AX1500i.
as you can get with a plug-in in the United States, and even then,
a couple of years ago, it wasn't possible.
Yeah,
efficiency was. Ugh. This is they say 80 plus titanium, which is not really a standard yet, but it's like being ratified, I guess, currently. Yeah. And it will run quiet and fanless under 450 watts.
And yes, you can arc weld with it.
Yeah, you can arc with it. $449 available in Q2 with a 7-year warranty. 1500 watts, 94 plus efficiency. Wow,
nuts.
That's crazy.
Wonder how many of those are going to sell a year.
I don't know. I would
that many.
I'd wonder how many of their AX1200Is they sold. I think those did pretty well, right? And the intelligence part of it, the USB connection where you can access load information, temperature information, fan speed information through their software was at least pretty neat. They also had the 250D Mini ITX case. This is part of their Obsidian line. And I actually have one of these here in the office with me already, but it is larger than a standard Mini ITX case. It's 11.5 by 11 by 13.5.
So is it bigger than a bread box?
It's bigger than a bread box, smaller than a refrigerator.
Okay.
Yeah. So some of the advantages that this case will have over other Mini ITX cases, it will support full-size graphics cards. It will support up to a 240 millimeter self-contained water cooler. And it just has that capability because it has more space in there. It's a larger case. The motherboard actually sits flat. How did I say that? Parallel to the ground, the motherboard sits instead of perpendicular. And so underneath the motherboard will reside the power supply, and it will fit full-size ATX power supplies. So you can, I mean, it's a smaller case, but it's almost too big to call like a small form factor design. It's just a small case. You have to have Mini ITX motherboard to use it, but it looks really neat. If you like the Obsidian design elements that Corsair's done recently, then I think you'll like what this does. And it's going to be under $100, $89 apparently, available later this month. And they announced a keyboard that has RGB LED lighting under every single key, and it's a Cherry keyboard. And I think this is the first time this has ever happened. I know this is actually because the Cherry guys were on hand to talk about it. And they had to redesign the switch so that you could put an individual LED in the switch and have the light actually come out of it. And obviously they weren't willing to sacrifice feel of the keys. It'll be available in blue, brown, and green, I want to say. No, red. Yeah, there we go.
That's kind of insane. That's a lot of engineering for just a keyboard.
Yeah, they didn't tell us a price yet.
It's gonna be nasty. I'm sorry.
It's gonna be expensive. It's not gonna be available until the mid of the year. But they had like the demo video that they're showing. It does some cool stuff. Like they said, it's gonna have cool stuff, and it's gonna have a mode like they call it
W keys highlighted red and the rest white.
Yeah, like you could create profiles for each game so that certain keys light up in different colors while you're playing Battlefield versus different ones when you're playing Crisis versus when you're playing StarCraft. It'll have like while you're typing, it can have a mode that they call it like, I think they call it wave mode or something, where you hit a key and like the lights kind of expand out of it and a wave of light goes around off the side of the
droplets or
ripples and stuff.
Pebbles in a pond.
Yeah, it looked really cool, but I have a feeling this is going to be, I think I said $300 and somebody said no. So it's going to be under $300, but I don't know where else that falls in line with
Maybe they were just laughing at you say, you unwashed peasant. It's going to be $500.
Well, I don't think they'll sell very many there.
Probably
We've
not.
already talked about a lot of Asus products, but a couple last things. They showed the Asus Thunderbolt EX2 expansion card. You may remember the Thunderbolt EX original expansion card that was never
Yeah.
actually shipped.
Yeah, that was a lot of promise in that. And I have
Yep.
a AMD motherboard that actually has a plug for that Thunderbird card, or
Thunderbolt.
Thunderbolt. But
Thunderbird
yeah,
port would be awesome.
but yeah, I want my email application to be plugged right into it. But anyway, yeah, Apple kind of put the kibosh on that one. They
Yeah.
talked to Intel and said, "Hey, look, we don't like you guys putting out these third-party cards, even though it's not you, but you need to stop it." And
So now it's officially going to happen, I guess.
yeah, finally, well, after struggling for years, getting people to try to make Thunderbolt compatible parts that will fit into their products, they finally like, hey, you know what? This whole closed garden that we're
Turns
trying
out that
to
ecosystem can help.
hit, that external ecosystem can help dramatically. That pollen from those dirty and nasty trees over there can help everything blossom.
They also announced a ROG front-based dual bay gaming panel. It's kind of a glorified fan controller, temperature monitor. It also has some EQ settings, like you hook your front panel audio connector up to it, and it has some EQ settings through that. It also has a button that I can't remember what they call it. What is it called? What do they call
It's
it?
the boss button.
They call it the escape mode button, but yes,
Oh.
it should be called the boss button. It automatically returns user to system desktop and mutes sound volume. So it has a button on the front panel that when your wife or your boss is coming around the corner, you quickly hit that button and it closes the game, takes you back to the desktop, and mutes the sound. So
And they
it's
need to bring
really,
up a stinking
really
Excel spreadsheet when you do that as well.
Yes. Yeah. I think CBS does
Yes.
that with their March Madness thing, right? It's pretty funny. But I don't know how, it's cool. We'll see how many people kind of adopt it. I think the interface is kind of clunky. The way you have to switch between things and hold down the button for 3 seconds. And I don't know. There's other buttons on there that they could have used for those purposes.
Yeah, but
so.
the LED panel quality is pretty nice. I looked at that and
It
it's
is,
like, wow,
yeah.
sharp.
It's good. Let's see.
Right.
Let's see the part in the video here. Yeah, here. Let's see. I'm pointing at that button right now.
Mhm.
And King, there you go. So it's got Assassin's Creed 4 up. So I push the button and
Chink.
boom. Back to your desktop. With the sound mute, it's pretty funny stuff. The last thing that they had, well, not the last thing, but the last thing we're going to mention is they announced a Transformer Book Duet TD300, which is it's a 13.3-inch notebook, 1080p screen, but it has both Android and Windows 8 on it. So they're calling it a 4-in-1 display or 4-in-1 device. It's an Android tablet or notebook. It's a Windows 8.1 tablet or notebook. It's starting at $599 for the i3 version and $699 for the i3 version as well. There must be a different resolution screen on there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't really see the compelling. I don't see the benefit to an Android notebook, right? So
It seems like if
idea-
you're going to use one or the other, you're just going to use that one or the other.
like I kind of see the idea of I have a Windows Windows notebook that I can do work on, but then if I disconnect it, I can go into Android mode if I want and play Android games or
I
it's
guess if
easier
you got
to
a
use.
ton of apps on
Yeah.
your phone that you've already paid for and you
Yeah.
can transfer them to those, then maybe.
And the Windows tablet app store is not great still, right? Like the Windows App Store. So there's maybe some things on there that you like to do on a tablet that just don't exist on a Windows 8 tablet. So you want to use Android, right? So it's a neat little idea. The hardware is is it Atom based? No, it's Haswell based, isn't it? I believe it is.
I think so.
Yeah, I think it is because it says up to Core i7 processor, 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gig SSD.
So there's another Haswell Android implementation.
You're right. Yep. I lied. I had seen one before. Damn.
Yeah, I forgot it too. It's okay.
It's okay. It's all right. Yep. All right. So there was a lot more stuff we saw at CES. There's a lot more stuff we wrote up at CES. Again, there's lots of great CES coverage all over the place. If you go to pcper.com/CES, you can see a lot of it there. And we have some videos and whatnot on our YouTube channel if you want to check that out. Obviously, we didn't get to any questions this week because it was the CES wrap-up episode. But if you want to send us an email, please do. twitch@twit.tv, twitch@twit.tv. And we will get back to our kind of normal cadence of stuff next week. And I'm pretty sure Patrick will be back, so we shouldn't have any problems unless he decides to move to Las Vegas and stay there forever. But who would do that, right? Who? Nobody I know. Josh, thank you very much for filling in last minute. We both kind of got off of airplanes, went into our offices, and recorded this show. So, but hey, I came home to snow. Did you come home to snow?
No, I came home to warmer weather than what I was expecting.
Okay. It's like 25 here.
In Laramie.
Half-inch snow everywhere, and I think it's been snowing the whole time I've been in here, so we'll see what that's like when I drive home. But thank you again for joining me. I'll talk to you tomorrow probably. And then for everybody else, we'll be back next week. If you want to find the rest of our episodes, it's at twit.tv/Twitch. You can find subscription links and back episodes and all that good stuff there. We thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.